Welcome to Stewardology, a podcast where two worlds collide. In this show, financial advisor Tim Russell and Pastor Drew Gysi are joined by me, producer Tyler Rutherford, to explore the intersection of financial stewardship and theology. Their unique perspectives help Christians and churches understand and apply a biblical framework for everyday financial decisions so Christians everywhere can grow in their walk with Christ through biblical stewardship. Before we get started, we just wanted you to know that the topics discussed in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations. Investment and investment strategies involve risk, including the potential loss of principal, and past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Securities and advisory services are offered through Genius Wealth Management, member FINRA, and SIPC. Without further ado, here are your hosts, Tim Russell, Drew Gysi, and Tyler Rutherford.
Today we're going to be talking about should we loan money to family members, and I'm here with my co-hosts Tim Russell and Tyler Rutherford.
Howdy.
And think about this. Your cousin Monty, both of you guys, your cousin Monty, you both have one.
We both have a cousin named Monty.
And they still owe you $20 from that pizza night and that all the way back in that, we'll say 2007, and you remember it. And they
How old would you have been?
Yeah. How old? That was a lot of money back then.
I was old enough.
So, and this cousin Monty strides into the family reunion with this sheepish grin on his face, and he says, "Hey, I just need a quick $5,000 to get my artisanal pickle factory up and running. I'll pay you back, I promise."
Go pound sand.
Your wallet screams, what's it say, Tim?
Go pound sand.
But your heart says, Monty's family. Before you start drafting that IOU on that napkin off to the side there, let's talk about lending money to the family members. You know, it's a minefield of good intentions that we have. There's those awkward dinner things that could happen afterwards and the potential financial fiascos. Today, we're going to kind of unpack this. Should we lend money to family?
Did you say it was a pickle business?
It was our artisanal pickle business.
Delightful.
So, that's
delightful.
So, do you mean delightful? Yeah, I think that's what you meant. So,
Well,
hey,
I think we have to discuss lending versus giving, Drew. What do you like? There's differences here, right? Am I giving this money to someone and they're running with it, or am I like, how's this working?
that needs to be the first question that the person that is going to loan the money, they need to make that decision up front.
Yeah, well, so you have three choices, not two choices, right? It's not just lend, give. It's lend, give, don't give. Don't lend.
That's a good.
So
Tim.
it's do or do not, right? You can go either way. If you choose to give them money, is it a loan or is it a gift? And there are landmines on either side.
Yeah.
The problem if we lend the money is that now we're in a debtor-borrower relationship. We've changed the relationship from cousins to lender-borrower. There's now a power imbalance and a power dynamic at play. You mentioned those awkward dinner issues. Well, those are the awkward dinner issues when they're due a payment, Thanksgiving rolls around, and they're 3 months late. Thanksgiving dinner tastes a little different when you're looking at Monty and he's talking about his family vacation to Montego, and you're wondering where your $3,000 payment is. Well, it's in Montego right now, apparently.
And he did not even bring pickles to dinner.
No pickles. Yeah, go figure. Or you've got all kinds of dynamics that are involved in lending scenarios, especially if it's like an implied lend on a gentleman's agreement. You have a handshake. Well, what if you forget or he forgets? What if you forget about particular terms? Everything has to be written down and documented and signed and dated and agreed upon so that your memory doesn't fall victim to just the realities of time.
So I think the first thing is really lending changes that relational dynamic.
It does.
It radically changes it. But also, let's talk about generosity without expectation. It's Christ-like.
Whoa. Yes, it is. Maybe positive, pause, I should say. Landmines. Let's talk about the landmines on the giving side. If you have money and they know it, and they come to you looking for money and they ask for it to be a gift, now we've created potential entitlement issues. Potential like, why am I doing for you something that you should do for yourself? You're not entitled to this money just because you're my cousin or my child for that matter. I can choose to give, or I can choose to lend, or I can choose to do nothing. You have no right to demand from me a gift or not. Now, I can choose to give that money away, but you have to know the person that you're lending the money to and what this is likely to do within their heart and their work ethic. Are they going to work as hard if they know it's a gift? If they know they don't have to repay, that the business can be successful or unsuccessful, or whatever the endeavor is that the money is going to support. Again, so many things are fact dependent. If there's a real financial need, I have no problem with a gift. If it's a business opportunity, I would want it to be more like a pay me back. You need to have skin in the game. Don't treat this lightly, because I don't want you to be able to think you can blow the money and blow the business and that not affect our relationship. Does that make sense? So let's get back to your point, however, because I think your point is still valid. Generosity, giving without expectations, is Christ-like in a way. So, Drew, why don't you explain what you had in mind with that?
Well, you're not expecting a repayment. If you can financially afford to be a blessing to a family member, that changes the dynamics. Yes, they may come and ask you, but you may have that opportunity to say, you know what, instead of making this alone, I would like to bless you instead. What a great opportunity for family to be able to do that. So it does change things, but what it does is you are not now putting an obligation on that relationship. And if God has blessed you with great generosity towards you so you can be generous to others, I would say go for the generous piece. But then, Tim, you said earlier, you got to look at the person. You got to look at what they're using it for. You got to process this. If this is just going to get piddled away, we need to really rethink that.
Drew, you remember last episode I was talking all about these like tax issues and tax concerns?
Oh,
There'd be a tax issue and tax concern here if you choose to be generous. You want to be generous, you want to bless them, that's great. Know what you're getting into. There is an annual gifting limit. You're
Correct.
only allowed to give so much money to a person per year.
Correct.
If you are married, you can give $18,000 per person. So you can give $18,000, your wife can give $18,000. If your cousin Monty is also married, you can give $18,000 to him and $18,000 to her. So your wife can do $18,000 to him and $18,000 to her. So you can give away a lot of money. But if you're giving away beyond that, if it's one person to one person, you're only limited to $18,000. You have tax issues. If you give more than $18,000, and that's in the year that we're recording this, 2025, that number's indexed to inflation. It will be different in the future. So you may want to look what the annual gifting limit is if you're listening to this in a year or two in the future. You will have to, if you give more than that annual gifting limit, you'll have to file a gift tax return. It's not taxable to you. It's not taxable to the person you're donating the money to, but it does go against your lifetime gifting limit, which is roughly $14 million right now. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about generosity, because your generosity can also create unintended consequences. And by the way, you have to file that gift tax return every single year now going forward for the rest of your life. You can't miss it, because that's where the government keeps track of how much you're giving. It's got to be included in your tax return going forward.
So this is my stream of consciousness. Correct me if I'm wrong. So from a Christian perspective, let's say from a borrower or from a lender standpoint, like if you lend money to someone, you should be willing and able to forgive that loan, right? As an act of love, compassion. If you have the ability to, that is something that you can consider doing. From a borrower standpoint, it is your duty to repay the loan. a breakdown happens when both people don't live up to their side of the agreement, correct? So what this could boil down to is if you can't forgive an unpaid loan, like whether that's a spiritual thing or an attitude thing, perhaps consider being generous with it instead? Question mark. What do you think on that?
There are two sides to every story.
It's super specific and circumstantial.
So it depends on the nature of the lend. What's the money being lent for? What's the heart behind the person borrowing the money? Maybe. Yeah. Or maybe the answer in that case would be just don't lend it at all. Yeah. Tell them to go to the normal bank environment or to someone else.
Because no is also a right answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Remember, God has placed you as the steward of the money, not your cousin Monty. Mm-hmm. Monty's not the steward. You are. God has placed that in your authority and your control. So don't be manipulated into giving that money away if you don't believe that it is in the best interest of Monty, that money, or your relationship.
Yeah, and there's some risks to loaning money to family. And I think the thing that comes to my mind first, what scares me the most, is the slave lender dynamic. The borrower is slave to the lender from Proverbs 22. That freaks me out, especially when you come into the relationship dynamics there. Whereas maybe at one point you're just brothers having a brother-to-brother relationship dynamic. Now you're in a slave-master dynamic with loans and stuff. That rubs me the wrong way. I don't really like that. What do you guys think on that?
I am not a fan to go lateral when it comes to the give about the loan.
If you mean lateral to siblings?
Siblings,
okay.
Siblings, yes. Yeah. I am not a fan of that. I've seen it happen. I've not seen good come from it.
Just seems ripe for disaster.
I think it does. I have no problem when it comes to children, grandchildren. I think that's part of who we are as parents and grandparents to be able to do those things as God has blessed. I'm very concerned about going sideways, but I have no problem going down with that generosity. But I'm a big fan. If you are going to go with a loan, you need to make sure that you would be willing to forgive that, because the relationship has always got to be more important than the money. Always. And many times we allow the relationship to get damaged because of the money.
I agree with you. I agree with you in theory and in principle. I also really struggle with that because I don't want the assumption on the borrower side, like you were saying earlier, Tyler, that I can just go and be reckless with my life, reckless with my finances, because he'll always forgive it.
He'll forgive it. It'll be okay.
Well, see, now that's a whole different package there. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. What it comes down to is if I'm going to loan you money, and let's say you are going to go reckless, but then you're going to come back to me and ask me again. I mean, God has given me something called common sense. It is going to shut down. You've damaged the relationship by not upholding what you said you were going to do with it. So I am not going to be this money tree that people can come running to. But if you say you want to build this artisanal pickle factory, cousin Monty, hey, and you actually do it, and now you're doing well with it, guess what? You come back to me and say, hey, look, I need some more storage for pickles. I need another $50K. Can we have that same type of agreement? You know what? You've proved to me that you've done well. You know what? Maybe I can do this, or maybe I can become a partner in this business.
Yeah. Well,
it's a different story.
So that's not. I agree with you. I don't disagree with anything you said. My point is that it's the assumption that I'm willing to forgive it. Like, I get the need to be willing to forgive. Like, it's better for you to be. What does Paul say? It's better for you to experience loss than to go drag your brother into the courts.
Yeah,
and to execute your legal rights in the courts before unbelievers. That's not something that we want to do.
Right.
So I get that, but I also feel like there's moral danger in the assumption that before you lend, you must be willing to forgive. Like I would say, if you feel there's any chance that this individual is going to not be faithful to their word or is not going to be able to repay, I don't lend the money.
Yeah. Well,
don't lend the money.
We're on the same page.
So either
Tim.
don't give it at all,
Yeah.
or give them less as a gift, but don't do the whole thing, because you can't take on that burden and responsibility.
And that's common sense, Tim. You got to look at the person, the character. If they're part of your family, you've seen how they have lived, and you do need to take that into account for the very first time loan or gift.
Yeah.
So some of the other risks of loaning money to family, the lendee, let's say they don't pay. You gave them money and they didn't pay you back. Well, that's going to create division in the family. That's going to give them a tarnished name. That's just going to be ripe for drama and ripe for all kinds of disaster. And so Proverbs 22:1 says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. That's definitely true here. This is something that I wouldn't want to risk, even in my own family. Like right now, like my family situation, we have great unity, but you get into a slave lender situation or slave borrower situation, or whatever. Like I think it's ripe for disaster all around.
It is. There's another verse, we could have read it earlier, but I think it still applies. Resentment kills a fool, and envy stirs up the simple.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, envy slays the simple, from Proverbs 5:2.
Job 5:2.
Yeah, Job, the other one. Yeah, Job 5:2. The reality is that unmet expectations creates resentment, and that creates an opportunity to destroy relationships. I feel like we've been dancing around this the entire time, but another way that this, things could go bad when lending money to family members is that it can enable poor decisions. And that's where I like, no is a right answer. If you're afraid this is just going to enable foolishness, don't give the money away. God made you the steward, not them. If God wanted them to be the steward of the money, he would have given it to them, or he would have moved it in your heart to give it to them. But please, by no means feel like you need to enable bad decision-making.
I think another thing, before we get to the possible rewards of loaning money to family, but I think that we've talked about it briefly, but if you don't write these things down, the terms of your agreement could be either forgotten or taken advantage of. If you don't know clearly what's happening, when it's happening, how it's happening in terms of repayment, you can pretty much expect that it's not going to happen, right? Yeah. So make sure, like, if you go down this road, get it all written out clearly so everybody understands and everybody agrees upon it. Heck, get people to sign it. Like,
I got a story about that.
Please.
So I have been on the borrower side of these family lending arrangements. I needed some money for a purchase that my wife and I were doing, and my dad lent me the money, and he wrote out this agreement and said, you're paying once a year. It's got to be paid by the end of the year, December 31st. Here's the payment cycle, and it's interest-free if it's paid off by X date. I totally forgot about X date.
Uh-oh.
And X date was frankly before the full, like, every payment would have paid it off. Like, let's just say if we divided it by, would have been, I'm doing the math in my head, guys, 10 years. I would have had 10 years to pay the thing off. It was less than that. Maybe it was 7 years. 7 years to pay the thing off. But if I paid it in year 5, the whole thing, there would be no interest. But if I went to year 6 or 7, it went retroactive interest. I didn't realize that. I signed the stupid paperwork. I forgot about that balloon payment note in there. And when my dad came to me and said, hey, Tim, you going to have this paid off by December of this year? Because remember, if you do it, there's no interest. Like, what? I went back and looked at the note and like, it's there. I do remember. Oh, I do vaguely remember seeing that. I totally forgot what I agreed to. The fact that we put it in paper, that I had a copy of it, that he had a copy of it, that I signed it, my wife signed it, my mom, my dad signed it. We all were on the same page. I was able to say, you know what, I really need to pull everything together and get this thing paid off by December because I don't want it to pay any interest.
So is that what you did?
That's what I did.
Yeah.
Good for you.
But that's an example of why you want to have it written down, not just a handshake agreement. If it's not written down, it never happened.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a written documentation that it was a loan with the expectation of repayment, it was a gift from the government's perspective. You have no leg to stand on when going to the court. So write stuff down. Not because you're going to take them to the court, but because your memory could be faulty like mine was.
Our memories fail us all the time, right? You think you thought something and you think this happened and it didn't happen a different way. Like just having it written down is such a fail-safe. So what are some of the rewards of loaning money? What comes to mind, Drew?
Well, the first one I want to say is you're able to bless others. God has blessed you with this gift of finance, and you can now be a blessing to others through loans and even gifts that you want to be able to do. So helping someone with these blessings that the Lord has given to you, it's a chance for you to display biblical generosity. And hopefully those who receive would understand and know and get that same. So when the day comes and they can do it, they can actually do that same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Helping others avoid high interest rate debt is another blessing. If you can give them a loan in a really low interest rate environment, a low interest rate in a high interest rate environment could really save the borrower a lot of money and make things a lot more affordable. I think it's a significant benefit.
And we see that in Scripture, especially in Old Testament days, that it's been told many times that the Jewish people were supposed to loan money and to their relatives, to others, at zero interest.
Yeah, Proverbs 19:7 says, "Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and He will reward him for what he has done."
Yeah.
It's kind of like a little bit of a tangent, but it's a personal story that has to do with the whole interest rate thing. And it kind of goes even with the next point, which is lower interest rates, avoiding high interest rate debt. Yeah, that's good. Getting a low interest rate, that's good. But even getting negative interest rate is even better. Can I tell you a story about that? Again, this is really early in my marriage, really early in my career. My wife and I didn't have two nickels to rub together. We needed to get a new vehicle for our growing family, and we bought a car. We borrowed some money from my dad, and my dad said, "I'm taking it from my car replacement fund. You just put a car payment back into my car replacement fund." His car replacement fund was like the growth fund of America, like a mutual fund at American Funds. And I don't know that we can do this today, but I literally linked my bank account to his investment account, and I sent in that car payment every single month, and I had to pay it off for maybe 3 years. Got about a year and a half into him, and that's like 2 years into it. It's like, Tim, you can stop the payments. I'm not done the payment cycle yet. It's like, the money that you took out for the car is now in the account because everything has grown. I'm going to count that as your payment. You're done. What a blessing that was to me. The market happened to work really well in my favor. I don't know how he would have responded if the market would have been down. I assume he would have just let the whole thing go to the normal term. And once I paid in the full amount, he would have been fine. But because the market was up, he said, "I'm going to bless you. The market's up. You can be done with your payment."
What's your dad's phone number?
Got to call your mortgage lender, convince them of this.
Yeah.
Well, so we talked about writing stuff down. How do we actually make it official in order to protect yourself and maybe the person that's borrowing?
I think first thing, decide lend or give. It's very simple. Decide lend or give. What's the next thing, Tim?
Well, draft a promissory note if you're going to lend it. So you want to write down the loan amount, the repayment terms. What is the interest rate? By the way, if you give a loan at a low interest rate, lower than the IRS compliant interest rate, which I believe for a short-term loan is like 4.75 right now, it could be deemed a gift. The interest-free or the lower interest, that portion of the payment is technically can be considered a gift. Really low likelihood the IRS isn't nailing people for this, but it's something to be aware of. What about the payment method? Are you paying cash, check, transfer, Venmo, right? What about the consequences of non-payment? And is there a signature and a date? In everything, set them an example by doing what is good. Titus 2:7.
The next thing is, as the payments are happening, you have to keep really careful records of everything that's been going on. Just so in the event there's some confusion, you can clear it up really quickly.
Yeah. And as a borrower, I took that responsibility on myself. I would write down every time there was a payment, on the date of the payment, the amount of the payment, so that I could track for myself where I was. And if there was ever a debate with the person I was paying back, I could show them and they could go see in their own records the proof that the payment was made.
Yeah, and if by chance you're choosing to do a larger loan for family members, seek legal counsel. If it's a good sizable amount, make sure things are drawn up and get professional advice to be able to do it. But let's shift on over and look at some principles for lending money to family. The first thing, Tim, you've said it multiple times. I think it is so good that we bring it up here again. There is no obligation to lend money to family.
You are not the bank.
Yeah. No is an okay answer. So very important. What else we got there?
Well, we already said it. Document everything. Verbal agreements are not ultimate. Like, your word is your bond, yes, but legally they're not. If it's not in paper, it never happened.
You also have to make sure your spouse is in agreement with
so
this.
important.
So let's say, like, me and my wife, we got our act together. Let's say that. And then say my brother asks me for money. He asks to lend money to him. Well, I'm not just going to go do that unilaterally. I'm going to make sure my wife is involved in the conversation, make sure she's okay with it. I don't want to do something behind her back, because remember, what's in my account that's our account. It's not my money, her money. It's our money, and it has an impact on that.
And I would go as far as saying, because I know your brother, I would say that your brother's wife needs to be involved in that conversation too. I think that would be wise to bring that if they're married
sets of spouses,
on both sets. And then also lend appropriately. Don't lend more than what they can handle paying back. I think it's very important that you know them, their family, you know their economic thresholds. Make sure that you don't give them more than what they can handle.
Yeah. You also need to plan for the worst case scenarios. What about death or disability? Are there plans that you need to set in place to make sure that payments are done? Is there life insurance there that needs to be taken into consideration? Is there disability insurance? Or is the plan just to forgive the loan upon death or disability? Like, these are just decisions you have to make and write it down.
Yeah, that's good. The other one that is that racks up anxiety in my mind is court fears.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest reasons I would opt to not lend money to a family member is if in the event they didn't pay, I'd be really nervous to take them to court for a number of reasons. I really don't want to do that. And so because I don't want to get involved, I don't want to sue, I don't really want to settle matters that way, I would personally opt to just not lend in the first place.
Yeah, and the final one is don't be a nag. You may see them driving up in a new to them car and they have not made payments, or maybe they're just a little late on things by a week, 2 or 3. You know what? You don't want to be a nag through this process. Don't be that overbearing lender type parent and it's really not a parent. It could be a lateral move also. Yeah. But keep the discussions separate when it comes to anything dealing with this loan, separate from those family times.
I think that's helpful. Think about it like you have a bird in your hand. You hold it too loose, the bird's going to fly away. You hold it too light, you're going to crush the bird. Or too tight, you're going to crush the bird. So, you need to have a balance between conversations about, you have an obligation to repay. This is not charity. You need to pay this back, versus just ignoring it and saying, pay it when you pay it. Don't nag them. I don't want to be the nag. Well, again, there's a balance here.
Don't make Sunday dinner uncomfortable for everybody else there.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable for them. That's okay. But, I would prefer you have that conversation offline and not there in front of everyone.
Yep.
So let's just shotgun through some questions to ask before lending.
Don't do it.
Number one, is the borrower responsible with their own money? I like Luke 16:10. It says, "Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much."
Yeah, that's really important. If the borrower is not demonstrating wise financial choices, lending to them may simply enable more bad financial choices. Don't lend in those scenarios.
So what are some of the questions we want to ask then?
Why are you looking for the loan?
Are they asking you? Why are they asking you for the loan?
Yeah.
And why should they be asking you? What's the why behind you?
What happens if repayment doesn't happen? Is it going to destroy your relationship?
Are you, as the lender, prepared to forgive the loan? That's a big question.
And another big question is, will this lending of money jeopardize you in any way, and or your spouse, your financial future, especially if that repayment doesn't happen?
That's actually a really good point. Like my wife, I love her heart because she wants to help everyone, everywhere, all the time.
What's her phone number?
But like we are not necessarily in a position to be lending money to people because we are borrowers ourselves. Like we have our own debts to pay, right? But if we're in a situation maybe 30 years from now where we don't owe anything to anyone other than maybe a mortgage, then we might be in a better position to do that. So I think it's important to also know your financial status. Are you really in a position to be lending money? Is it going to jeopardize your financial future at all in any way? That's a really good point, Drew. So let's get to the bread and butter of the episode. Let's answer the question. Should I be lending money to a loved one?
I would be hypocritical if I said no. I have been on the lending and the borrowing end of things.
Yep.
As a son, I have borrowed money, and as a father, I have lent money. You have to know your child and know what you can and cannot do. At times, I have had to be a little bit more stern and said, the bank is closed. This is it. No more. At other times, I have had to, be more generous to try to help in a particular situation and even forgiving some things in order to help this particular person to be able to get a leg up. So know your relationship, your child or your parent relationship well enough to know whether it's going to change the dynamic of Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah. Is it going to help them or hurt them?
So I'm sorry, I can't give you a straight yes or no answer. It depends on your relationships, and don't do it if it's going to jeopardize the relationship.
Yeah. I think generally speaking, at least for me, I would tend to not lend money, but at the same time, I wouldn't say never. Especially in the situation I'm in right now, I wouldn't do it just because of where I'm at. But you guys aren't where I'm at. You're in different positions altogether, right? So it puts you in a different category of risk with lending money to family as well.
Yeah, my wife and I, we have done that with our children, and we have lived with a home equity line of credit for decades, which periodically we have tapped, but very quickly returned the money to it. But my son was interested in doing some investment properties, and he needed some help to be able to get the first one or two off the ground. And it was originally going to be just a very quick turnaround of about a year or so. It turned out to be about 3.5 years, but we did not let that impact our relationship whatsoever. He made sure that he paid the interest payment that was due, and he needed some time to actually gain some equity within the properties, which he did get and do. So my wife and I looked at each other and said, you know what? Yes, it is a substantial amount of money, but it wouldn't send us underwater if he never paid us back. Mm-hmm. And we made that decision because we knew he had a good sense of numbers, understanding. He had an excellent work ethic, and we were so glad to be able to bless them with that capability of doing that. So as we kind of wrap up this time together, lending money to family is like walking that proverbial tightrope. One misstep and you're plunging into a pit of awkward, strange family and strained family relationships. Proverbs 22:7 warns that the borrower is slave to the lender. We said that many times in this episode because we want you to hear that. And now, and nowhere is that truer, especially in family relationships and family dynamics, where unpaid loans can really cripple conversations and dynamics in the relationship. A key application is this, that before lending, prayerfully consider maybe generosity, if you can do that. If your heart and your finances allow a gift, by all means, consider doing that, as long as it's not going to damage you or damage that relationship with that family member. It allows us to experience that generosity, that Christ-like generosity. If you must lend, please document it. Ensure spousal agreement there and prepare to forgive the debt if you so choose to or want to. Seek godly wisdom. Consult trusted advisors. Tim said it over and over in this episode and many of our past episodes. Get those advisors around you to make sure that you're doing it well, right, and also financially right, taxable right. And in doing so, you're both going to steward your resources and your relationships in a way that honors God and keeps the family reunion pickle-free.
Full circle. There we go.
All right, until next time, take care, God bless, and enjoy those dill pickles. They are delightful.
Thanks for joining us on the Stewardology Podcast, where financial stewardship and theology meet. We'd like to help you take your next steps in biblical financial stewardship. Subscribe in your podcast provider to get the newest episode delivered to you every week. Leave a 5-star rating and review to help new listeners find the show. Take advantage of your free personal stewardship review at stewardologypodcast.com/review. Be sure to follow us on social media and visit our website at stewardologypodcast.com for tons of free resources and hundreds of free episodes. You can also leave episode ideas at stewardologypodcast.com/idea. Remember, Psalm 20, verse 7, some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. See you next week.